Yo, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are now tuned in to the Black Factor. And of course, this is where you're going to get information in the raw. Where perspective is everything. We got the news you can use. Don't forget to support black media. And don't forget, the truth doesn't care what your opinion is, because it is what it is, and the truth is the truth. And this is where you're going to get nothing but the truth. So y'all know what it is. For my Black Factor family out there, y'all know what it is. Y'all know what time it is. It's time for the Black Factor. So don't forget, before we get started, y'all, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share, join. Hit your notification button, hit the little bell on the YouTube. Don't forget to tap those buttons, y'all, because they're very important. As they, help keep the show alive, keep this thing growing and thriving and doing what it does. Don't forget to get us on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And, of course, don't forget the podcast. Now, for my Oh So Smooth radio family who are simulcast in with us on this Wednesday, as usual, I want to welcome you as well to the Black Factor experience. And for the when we do our visuals, I'm going to give you a description, so y'all be sure to pay attention to that. But my Oh So Smooth people, don't forget you can download the radio app off of iTunes and off the Play Store, just in case you want to listen while you ride or whatever else you're doing. And you don't have to necessarily watch the show, because you can always get the Oh So Smooth radio app. All right. So before we get this thing going, let's do our little quick intro. And here we go. So look, y'all, we're going to get this thing kicked off. We got a lot to talk about tonight. A lot of things to discuss. A lot of issues to cover. Because as you have noticed, for those of you who are normally tuned in with me on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we have cut back hours. And I'm just going, I'm going to give y'all this little bit of service announcement. I guess I'm going to just, give it to you, tell you straight up what's happening. Just so you know, this is an absolutely pleasurable thing that I do when I do these shows for my family out there, because I believe in information, and I believe in how important information is and why it's a necessity for us to continue to get information and get the right information. Of course, like I always say, y'all know I say it all the time. Don't believe nothing that I say. Go back and check the information and make sure that I'm accurate. And if I'm wrong, always check me. But I try to make sure that we absolutely give the information accurately and 100% on point every single time. Now, I will offer my perspective, as usual, like most people in the media these days. It used to be the news. People would tell you the news and not necessarily inject their opinion. But I'm gonna inject my opinion, y'all. I can't help it, because that's where the perspective part of the Black Factor comes from. That's why I do what I do, because I got to give it to you from a place where you can disseminate the information from a little bit different side of the fence. And that just gives you food for thought, something else to think about. Now, while we thinking about things, let's think about this. So today, it turns out that Facebook decided to reject the idea of reinstating old Donald Duck's account on Facebook. They said, no, bro, we ain't ready for you to come back yet. You be doing the most. And of course, he's angry about that, because he wants a platform for him to be able to continue to spew his hate and tell lies. And, normally I would try to not be too opinionated about, people's lives, but it's gotten to the point where lies have become normalized, and the truth is a lie, and it's up is down, and the sky is red, and, so on and so forth. So, hey, bottom line, the man is a straight out liar. And he's continued to spew his lies. And in fact, he has every intention on taking democracy apart piece by piece. That is my opinion. And that is what apparently is actually happening. And there are lots and lots of There's a ton of information out there that specifically points to those things. And what amazes me is that these things are happening right under our own noses, and no one's doing anything about it. But what are you gonna do? Hey, what we gonna do? You know, we gotta do what we can, right? Funny thing about it though, even if they did reinstate that dude's account, if he's anything like most people that I know, he will be in Facebook jail probably within the hour. I mean, literally, you know, the circus will come to town and he'd be back in Facebook jail so fast it'd make everybody's head spin. So I don't think we're gonna have too much to worry about where that's concerned, because if he will violate the policies and rules of Facebook. I mean, let's be honest. If I can post a picture of, and y'all remember I showed this on the last show, if I can post a picture of a lynching that took place probably 100 years ago, whatever the case may be, and I get a message from Facebook that says, we had to remove something you posted. There are certain kinds of posts about suicide or self-injury we don't allow on Facebook because we want to promote a safe environment. You heard what I said, suicide. This was a picture of a lynching, but Facebook took it upon themselves to call it a suicide because the Facebook police are now monitoring every single thing, and you know, their algorithms or whatever it is, however they operate, they have chosen the narrative to try and whitewash what that picture and those pictures depicted. Now, I'm gonna go so far. We're gonna discuss that very thing in this show. We're gonna literally talk about how the narrative is continuously attempting to be changed. As late as even today, we had a lawmaker in Tennessee who went off the rails about the 3/5 compromise. And I'm going to show you exactly how that ties into where we are today. But before we get to that, and we get off of the orange dude and the identity politics that are apparently the thing that it seems to be seemingly keeping him in power and going to do its best to destroy the rest of us. The Texas bill to restrict voting is apparently has the potential tomorrow to advance in our state legislation here in Texas. Now, I want to talk about that right quick before we get too deep. You know, I've been looking at all of the legislation and stuff that's been going on across the country where they're attempting to operate within voter suppression. They are quicker to change the laws where voting is concerned because they're so concerned about the democracy, which is another lie. They're so concerned about equality and fairness. Yet we have people who have consistently been shooting up and destroying other people's lives across this country. There are over 300 million guns across this nation. When I say over, I mean way over. In fact, there's enough guns to go. There are enough guns in this country to have multiples in every household across this entire United States. There are only 330 million residents in this United States. But we have more guns and more killing, more people dying, and yet there's no legislation on the table. There's no talk of legislation on the table. There's no talk of making change to save people's lives. But they're more concerned about voter fraud that doesn't exist in America. Something wrong right here, y'all. There's something wrong. There's something definitely wrong. And don't get it twisted. I'm a gun advocate. Y'all know that. But let's be real. How is it that we're more concerned about something that doesn't exist and we're changing the laws for something that doesn't exist when we have other more serious issues that are not being addressed at all? It just goes to show you how we've normalized all of these things. But when they start talking about the legislation for voting, right? My question is, and it's always this, and y'all who follow this show know that we've discussed this on many occasions. It always amazes me how these short-term thinkers, consistently put themselves in a catch-22 by doing things that end up coming back to haunt them. They always manage to make laws and put rules in place that they themselves end up having to fight to try and survive. I don't know what's going on with the Republican Party. I've not, in my lifetime, of course, and throughout the politics that I've studied, the only thing that I have to compare to what's taking place right now is the change in politics in Germany during Hitler's rise. I've not seen anything, especially in this country, based on the fact that we have a democracy in place, or supposedly a democracy in place. I've not seen anything that has ever done what is happening right now. There will be a reckoning. And in fact, I as much as it will affect many of us, I do believe that it's going to probably affect them more. The funny thing is they want to restrict mail-in ballots and drop boxes and things of that nature. What I find most amazing is that they're the ones who use them the most. Now, I'm really going to struggle to see how that is going to truly affect many of the poorer and communities of color. I think it's going to affect them probably more than it's going to affect us. And I'm just going to wait for the fallout. But I believe that in their attempts to make these changes, it's going to end up hurting them as equally as much as they call themselves trying to hurt everybody else. For, again, laws that don't even have a basis. There is no widespread voter fraud. No one has proved it is yet. Everything is this so-called big conspiracy and something's wrong, but they can never tell you what it is, amazingly enough. No, that's not amazing. That is called being a loser. Losers behave the way we're watching these people behave. They lost. So now, because we can't stand to lose, we have to change the rules because we got to win some kind of way. Understand, the Republican Party has not won a popular vote in the presidency since 2004. This is them flailing in an attempt to save that power and control wielded by old white men in America. Yes, things are changing, y'all. Before we get too far into that, because I gotta touch on that subject some more. Garrett Roth, y'all. Former Atlanta police officer, the one who shot Rayshard Brooks in the back. Remember him when Rayshard Brooks was at the Wendy's in Atlanta, and he was running away, and he had the taser, and they fired at him and shot him in his back and killed him, which they did not have to do. Well, apparently the officer who shot him, Garrett Roth, has been reinstated as an Atlanta police officer. The Atlanta Civil Service Board says he was wrongfully terminated. And the mayor, of course, Keisha Lance Bottoms, she made a statement that it was necessary to fire him at the time because of the volatility of what was taking place in the United States during that time. Because let's remember, that was 2 weeks right after George Floyd had been murdered by a police officer. So she did that thing to kind of appease the people, I guess, or at least that is a statement that she made, so to speak. So anyway, he's been reinstated, although they say it's going to take some time for the reinstatement to actually take effect. They do still have him on administrative leave until his criminal charges are resolved, because he has been charged with the killing of Rayshard Brooks. I'll be very interested to see if he is able to make it out of that. They're claiming that the firing was a procedural error, if you will. So in other words, he didn't go before any boards. Nobody brought any evidence to say that he should be terminated and so on and so forth. Now, see, this goes back to what we talked about in previous shows, where we talk about these police unions. Now, these so-called conservatives are always against unions. They always want a union bust. They always want to bring down these unions. Yet, they never seem to want to talk about the police union. They want to give the police union the pass, the police unions and qualified immunity. And then they want to know why people are so ready for police defunding. it's unfortunate that the term defunding has become the sticking point for what we need, for what should be referred to as police reform, because the defunding of the police officers, of course, would stop a lot of the nonsense and the military issue of weaponry to make our police look like stormtroopers on the streets of America. That would help. But let's be real. The fact is the police needs to be dismantled and reassembled properly. There are several reasons for this. We are operating under a broken system, and it's been broken for a very long time. And interestingly enough, like this guy Garrett, George Floyd's killer, Derek Chauvin, his lawyers have filed a motion for a new trial. Why have they filed a motion for a new trial? Well, they're claiming that Derek Chauvin didn't receive a fair and impartial trial. I'm not going to, I guess, be cynical about it. I mean, this is the system. It's the way that it works. And this is the way that, these things operate. We're supposed to give a person an opportunity to make appeals and things of that nature. We knew this was coming. But the interesting part is that they are claiming that he deserves a new trial because one of the jurors, I apologize for not having the picture, but I'll give you a description, had worn a shirt and attended a event, a Black Lives Matter march, and he was wearing a T-shirt with the face of Martin Luther King on it, and it said, "Get your knee off of our necks." And this was prior to the trial, or prior to him being selected as a jury member. So they're saying that he lied on his jury questionnaire and that he should never have been on the jury, which, from what I understand, based on what I've heard, is a stretch. That's a long shot. That is okay, bro, really? Well, we'll see what happens. But of course, we know he had to find some reason to try it. So he's going to try it. All right. Well, part of today's subject, this is where we get into the educational area of the show. The 3/5 compromise, y'all. Now, I don't like talking to you all, my audience, my people out there, about some of this stuff in a way that would indicate or imply that I think that you are not educated, because I am absolutely speaking to a very educated audience. That is the reason why you all follow the Black Factor, because you know that the information provided is tied to current events and you appreciate the way that we do these things. Well, for those who may not know, let me give you a quick overview. The 3/5 compromise, which is in the Constitution, was first introduced by James Wilson and Roger Sherman, June 11th of 1787. The 3/5 compromise counted enslaved people as 3/5 of a person. So in other words, you were not considered a whole person, right? The agreement meant that the southern states got more electoral votes than if the enslaved population hadn't been counted at all, but fewer votes than if enslaved population had been fully counted. So let's think about this. It was a good thing for one part of the country for them not to be counted as whole, because that would have given them a stronger population, right? It was a good thing on the other part, because then that would have given them the right to make decisions, more or less, about their representation. The text of the compromise found that Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution states, representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. See, the compromise acknowledged that slavery was a reality, but did not meaningfully address the evils of the institution. In fact, the delegates passed out only the Three-Fifths Compromise, but also a constitutional clause that allowed enslavers to reclaim enslaved people who sought freedom. By characterizing them as fugitives, this clause criminalized the enslaved individual who ran away in a quest for freedom. Okay? Now, it affected the populace of America in a whole lot of ways. It, in fact, changed the dynamics of what would become the Missouri Compromise, the election of Thomas Jefferson in 1800, the Indian Removal Act of 1830, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. Now, all of these had to do with slavery, every single one of them, just like part of the reason why the Constitution was written and worded the way that it is. Now, y'all remember we went back some time ago and we covered how the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments dealt with the Constitution in regard to specifically the Second Amendment. And right now, on the table in Tennessee, they brought up the Three-Fifths Compromise because what they're trying to do is make an attempt at how to determine how the Three-Fifths Compromise is being taught in the classrooms. Now, this is where it gets clever, right? Because here, if Justin Lafferty, who is the lawmaker in Tennessee who brought this forward, a GOP lawmaker, of course, because you know they're steadily trying to change the voting laws. See, I'm bringing you forward. I'm showing you how this is all connected. He tried to explain that the Three-Fifths Compromise was a good thing. Now, in order for you to think that the Three-Fifths Compromise was a good thing, you first have to think that slavery was a good thing. Now, let's remember, this is Tennessee. His claim is that the Three-Fifths Compromise was basically a sort of first attempt at freedom for slaves. And now this is something that came out of the South. There, at no point in our history has the South, the southern states, the southern slave states, at no point have they ever been in favor of the ending of slavery. A lot of people have a misconception about how slavery ended, and they want to give Abraham Lincoln all the credit for doing it. But what people don't realize is that the only reason Lincoln freed the slaves was to cripple the South economically and beat them in war. It didn't have anything to do with him caring about black folks. It had nothing to do with that. This was all about the money. Anytime you want to find out about anything that's going on in America, follow the money. Always follow the money. Now, the reason he's doing this is an attempt at planting seeds, okay? The so-called conservatives of America understand, like I said earlier, they've not won the popular vote in America in regard to presidential elections since 2004. They're beginning to attempt to give you a revised history of what took place during slavery. Why? Well, because guess what, y'all? Every year that passes, a new group of individuals turn 18 and they begin to have the rights to vote. They have to be influenced about who they vote for and why. This attempt at whitewashing, if you will, the truth about what the Three-Fifths Compromise was really about is an attempt at telling young people, hey, look, slavery was not really a thing. It wasn't really it wasn't a bad thing. And Three-Fifths Compromise was a good thing for everybody. Okay? All of this is about the future of education. Now, my thing with this guy is he either doesn't know the truth himself, or he's twisting this lie to the future. I find that to be a little bit of a coincidence. I don't know if I like the timing of all of that. So, if they don't teach the truth about the Three-Fifths Compromise, it gives students sort of well, slavery wasn't so bad. What was slavery? Yeah, no, it was. Now here's the thing. This is a switching, a transference of the narrative. Now I'm gonna show you how deep this runs. They switch the narrative and it allows them to give a different perspective to our students, to our young people, to our children, to our grandchildren. And unfortunately, we've gotten so busy in this country that we don't teach our children from home. I'm not going to say any more because many didn't in the first place. And there is I've always had a problem with people who don't instruct their children from home, from the nonsense that sometimes comes out of our school systems. This type of conversation, it tamps down the conversation about reparations. It keeps younger people from believing that there's a need for the repair of people who worked for this country for 400 plus years for free. It makes people believe that slaves who endured all manner of violence, mistreatment, injustice, murder, rape, the list goes on. It would have one to believe that none of these things were even a big deal. It didn't matter. None of that happened. If we continue down this path, you will begin to believe our history will be rewritten so that these things actually didn't happen. And my thing is, if they were so proud of it, why do they want to distance themselves so far from it? This is their ancestors who did this. Okay. Now, these very same tactics were being used here in Texas in 2015. We had some school books that came out that used the word immigrant to describe slaves. Immigrant. In other words, according to the textbooks that they were using to teach our students within the school system, federally funded school system, I might add, that slaves were referred to as immigrants, as though they came here of their own free will, looking for a better way of life. See how changing the narrative will then have another generation of youth coming forward that believe that, slavery, those were immigrants. Like they picked fruit like Mexicans. They needed a better life, so they jumped on these boats and came over here. See how that works? This is what this lawmaker in Tennessee is attempting to do. This is yet another whitewash, yet another attempt at making our youth believe that slavery really wasn't a thing. If we're not careful, and don't get me wrong, I would love for slavery itself to be a bygone history fact. But the problem is that the residue, the things, the manifestations that have come from what was slavery remain within our communities today. There are those who would love to argue those facts, and those usually are the ones who do not look like us, who would like to tell us how well we're doing, who would love to tell us how we have nothing to be afraid of, and who would love to tell us how the police treat us equally and we have the right to vote and we have all of these things in our favor. But they don't tell you how the laws get applied unequally. Why? Because in their eyes, all things being equal, we got it made. We got it made in a place that we were never intended to be in the first place. We got it made in a place where while they were drafting their constitution, we were still in chains. And they intended to keep us in chains. Yet now, all of a sudden, They want to try and pretend like none of that happened. No, that didn't happen. Those were immigrants. They came over here and, made a way for themselves. They built their legacy. Really? They don't tell you about all the oppression after the fact, the Jim Crow laws and the KKK and all of the towns that they burned and all of the things that they stole and all of the people that they murdered and lynched. They don't want to talk about that part. That's why Harry Anslinger, the godfather of the drug enforcement agencies of America, went so far out of his way to make sure that taking away the legalization of marijuana was so important, because he started the campaign that marijuana made white women want to be with black men and and Hispanics. And he put his whole fear-mongering campaign to work and scared white America to death, which is exactly what the Republicans continue to do every single election cycle. Just like Donald Trump tried to tell the women, the white women in the suburbs, I'm trying to save you. Save them from what? But see, what he failed to understand, the same as the rest of these short-sighted so-called patriots, is that the white women are no longer the only ones in the suburbs. And you can't scare people the way you used to. All that saber rattling and noise you making. The old white people who were afraid, they're not afraid like that anymore. You're talking to an audience that is dwindling, which goes back to the reason why we're watching what we're watching take place in regard to the educational system. Because these new people that are turning 18, that are coming of age, that are able to vote. Do you know how many millions of people come online every 4 years when the election cycle turns, every 2 years when the midterms turn? New people that have opinions and the right to vote come forward. This is not 1950, 40, nothing. Times are changing. People's attitudes and ideologies are changing. They are left with cheating and telling lies in order to attempt to maintain or hold on to what little bit of control they have left. If you think this is the end of that, I got news for you. They are going to work overtime. They're going to lie harder. They're going to cheat harder. This is something that we must be prepared for. This is something that we must be prepared to fight against. A lot of us want to sit down and act like the voting doesn't matter and all of this. But let me show you something. The census just came out. And politically speaking, see, people don't, it's funny how we don't realize how connected all this stuff is. Because of the census count, and a lot of black folks, we real quick to, stay out of my house. I don't be bothered with that. Well, the Democrats are about to lose multiple seats in the House and the Senate because of the count, because of the way the count came out. Republicans are picking up seats, which means that now the balance of power is about to change again. You're watching people go forward in our political system and tell bold-faced lies. They're going to continue to tell these lies until they believe that they are the truth, until they make them become true. That's the tactic of liar. And we're watching it take place right in front of our eyes. The best thing we can do to combat all of that, elections are coming again, y'all. And when they do, guess what that means? 2022. It's time to vote again, vigorously. We got to get our people up and we got to get our people out, and we got to make the difference. If we do not do this, I can tell you straight up, and this is one of those times where I can honestly say I hope I'm wrong again. But let me tell you, America is going to be over soon. All that little security you think you got, all that, I got my nice house over here and I got me a couple of cars and we straight my retirement and my Bitcoin, and you're going to lose all that. Look up autocracy. And if you think that these things are not possible, I promise you, you're so close to it, you have no idea. There are things going on behind the scenes that you have no idea about. You have the power and the ability to keep things at least on some level where we are. We don't need to slip no further back. But I promise you, if things go the way that these people who will stand up there and tell you the 3/5 compromise was a good thing, and they'll tell you that slaves were immigrants, baby, we ain't got a chance out here. They want to describe these people as immigrants. The same way I just showed you this picture where Facebook told me that they wanted to take this down because it had depictions of suicide. And they wanted to share ways that they could probably support or find support for someone if they have a problem. Suicide, y'all. That's what Facebook called this. Switching the narrative. This is what we're talking about now. Just to give you an idea. The future is closing in on the past. And they know it. The continued exclusion and discrimination, which is a nice way of saying conservative, is the same as the new word for Nazi and Klan member. What is that word? Patriot. Whenever you hear somebody talking about a patriot, your skin needs to start to crawl. The hair should stand up on the back of your neck. Patriot is the new buzzword for Nazi, for Klan member, for Proud Boy, Oath Keeper. It's not a joke. This is what's happening. They want to refer to slaves as workers, as though they were here to get a check. They was going to get paid at the end of the day when they got done picking cotton. This is what we're dealing with. It's not a joke, y'all. Now, interestingly, in one of the books, one of the school books in the Texas school system, I want y'all to look at this because it's laughable. It says, if you can see that, patterns of immigration. They're attempting to show you patterns of immigration. And next to that map right there of the United States, it describes the patterns of immigration, and it reads, the Atlantic slave trade brought millions of workers from Africa to the southern United States to work on agricultural plantations. Not one mention workers. Millions of workers from Africa. That's what they brought. They won't tell you they brought millions of Africans to enslave them. Free labor, which, by the way, is exactly what built America. Free labor, without which America is not what you know it is today. This country is rooted in the violence, the murder, the rape, the pillage, the destruction of an entire people in order to build it to what you know it is today. But this is what they want the future generation to believe. They want to try and distance themselves from history, from the violence, from the human trafficking, the murder, the rape, and destruction of all of this is exactly what created these United States. Now, I'll have people who will say to me, oh, you're wrong. Say it. I challenge you to prove me wrong. I challenge you to show me how America was built without free labor. I challenge you to show me how America was built without murdering its indigenous tribes who lived here long before Columbus got lost and then saved by those very same people. I challenge you to prove to me how America was built without that blood that remains in the soil of every inch of this country, this continent for that matter. I challenge you to prove it to me. Show me how it happened. Now, if you as a parent, a grandparent, are not or have not expanded your own education and world in order to teach and arm your children to get the right information, the lessons that they need, then you have done yourself and your children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and so on a great disservice. Because you allow people who write these nonsensical textbooks and lawmakers like that gentleman in Tennessee who will tell you how great the 3/5 compromise was to teach our children that this is not a big deal. If we've not given our children the necessary tools to be or attempt to be something other than an entertainer, a rapper, a basketball player, some other nonsense that we have been brainwashed into believing is the only method by which we are able to attain wealth in America, then we've done them a great disservice. There's other things for us to do. And yes, there is a thing called rocket science. And yes, it is possible. You know, I cringe sometimes thinking about the amount of talent that lingers and languishes within the penitentiary system and the penal system of America. The people who I know for a fact are brilliant that'll never get a shot. The people who were led down pathways that, had they not gone down, could have been the next Einstein. In fact, are basically Einstein, but they didn't know it. And therefore the rest of the world suffered because of it. We have Einsteins among us. We have Mensa candidates among us. And if you don't know what Mensa is, please look it up. There's plenty of other things for us to be doing. And Malcolm X clearly stated, only a fool will let their enemy teach their children. So we have to be very, very careful about the influences and the information. You know, we give a lot of credit sometimes, too much, to our instructors, to our doctors, to people who we're supposed to trust. We used to give a lot of leverage to police officers and people who are in what we refer to as respectable positions in the world. But somewhere along the line, we've begun to figure out that these are human beings as well. And some of them don't have enough integrity in their big toe to be trusted. Many of them are chasing the money. Many of them are chasing fame. Many of them are chasing power. And unfortunately, it costs us because they'll lie to us and tell us that we need this or we should do that because it makes them more money. Not because we need it, not because they care. It's self-serving. And one thing that I've learned as I've gotten older, you know, everybody wants to be rich, right? But very few people can show you their path to wealth. And the fact is, the average person of wealth has done some things that may have been a little unscrupulous. Not everybody. Don't get me wrong. I don't want you to misunderstand me. I remember once one of my daughters, she had a girlfriend and she would go and stay the night over there and hang out with them from time to time. And these people had a lot of money. Oh boy. And they had all kinds of fancy high dollar cars parked in the driveway, and Benzes and G-Wagons and limos and all sorts of stuff. And she'd go over there and hang out with them from time to time. And she held them in pretty high regard, mostly because they were, pretty wealthy people. Now, they were not people of color. And one day we were driving past their house, and we were looking at she was looking and she saw, oh, so-and-so is home. I see her car there. Dad, we should go buy a G-Wagon. Like, listen, baby, we just live in this neighborhood. Daddy ain't got G-Wagon money. Okay. I live here because I'm trying to help you to get a better education. Don't get it twisted. I had to make sacrifices. But I had a talk with her that day, and I said, baby girl, let me explain something to you about people. I said, just because what you see on the surface sometimes appears to be something, try not to put all your eggs in that basket, because you never really know what people are up to. And I left it right there. And I never had any reason to suspect anything about these people. I didn't know them. Not like that. This was one of her high school girlfriends. And, like any two kids, they hang out together, and they, one comes stay over my house, and she goes stay over their house. No big deal. She even had her own room at their house. That's how big their house was. And probably about a couple of weeks later, after we had this conversation, where I really thoroughly explained to her that we live in an area where you have to really ask yourself, what do all of these people do? What do these people do that they make so much money that they can afford to live in these mansions and these huge houses? When we think about the 1%, we think about the people in the world who are actually walking around that are able to afford anything they want and do anything they want. Most of us don't know those people. We don't know a lot of people like that. We all know somebody like that, but we don't know a lot of people like that. And then you really have to be, question, how did they get that way? I've had people tell me, and I've never considered myself, I don't need me to consider myself nothing. I'm not wealthy, but I've always been able to manage and have the nice things for me and my children. But I've had people who I found out that were like sort of in a chase, like trying to do what I did and keep up with what I did. And I had a guy actually approach me one day, and he told me, man, one of these days I'm gonna catch up to you. Catch up to me? Bruh, don't do that. I was like, you making a mistake, homie. You don't know me like that. You don't know how I do what I do. You don't know where I get what I got. You don't know if I inherited something. Don't bust your neck trying to keep up with me. You'll kill yourself. Don't do that. I'll never try to keep up with anybody else. I do me. Well, long story short, it came down to probably about 3 weeks, a month later. My daughter comes home and she goes, Dad, let me tell you what just happened. Well, apparently the feds came to these people's houses and kicked the door in, confiscated everything. And it turns out that they were involved in something with the Security and Exchange Commission. And at the time when they got raided, they were in Indonesia or something like that, some other country. And the feds couldn't touch them. And I suspect they must have known this. They left their children there, and one of their uncles or somebody had to end up coming to get them. Well, they went from rags, well, not rags to riches, just the opposite. From, like my mama used to say, they went from sugar to shit. Quick. So now all of a sudden, all of the designer clothes, all of the big cars, and the house, the whole thing, everything gone. About a month later, they had an auction at their house, and I went to it. And my daughter was standing there next to me, and she's like, this is so weird. She was like, literally, I used to sleep right there. Every room had flat screens on the wall. This is back before, before people had that kind of, just flat screens everywhere and that type of thing. And I was basically being nosy because I wasn't gloating, and I wasn't happy that this was happening to these people. But it was more of a lesson for my child. And I explained to her, I said, now, ironically, we just had this conversation. I said, now do you see what I mean? And she said, absolutely. And that was the end of that. But my point was that you just don't know. You just never know. Now, back to the issue of the school systems. And like I said, Malcolm X stated clearly, only a fool would let their enemy teach their children. Yet we send ours, by law no less, into the institutions every single day to be told that our ancestors, many of whom can't even be accounted for because we have no generational wealth, because a lot of it has been stolen, stripped, or in fact, we can't even trace our heritage beyond certain southern states where a name was given to a slave with the same last name as his master. So we have a very difficult time tracing our heritage beyond a certain point in this country. Yet, we continue to allow these very same people to instruct our children about history and the realities of where we stand today. They were volunteers, y'all. Let me stop. Without us, this experiment we call America is not a thing. Did y'all know that in recent years, they listed Moses as a founding father? Because even though we have a separation of church and state in these United States, you have to also remember that it is founded in religious dogma, practices. It's everywhere. Go to Washington. All kinds of religious stuff in regard to our government. They'll continue to also, throughout these history books, to have you to believe that the Civil War didn't have anything to do with slavery. Civil War was all about slavery. Period. Prove me wrong. Now, with all of that being said, what was January 6th? Depends on who you ask. Because now the Republicans would have you to believe that this was a kumbaya moment. None of this happened. This was not even a big deal. Oh, no. People running up in the Capitol and threatening to kill congressmen and senators and wanting to hang Mike Pence, the vice president, hang gallows outside the Capitol. Oh, no big deal. The lies, the misinformation, the twisting of the information. This is what we have to deal with. This is what we got to be careful of. They are downplaying it already. Forget the history part. We ain't 4 months away from that. And here we are pretending like, that didn't happen. That no big deal. Got to be careful, y'all. These are people who are demanding equality. People, not them, not the insurrectionists, but we have people in this country who are now demanding equality and they're demanding justice, and they're not all black. Do you know how scary that is for white people who feel entitled, who want to be in power, when they have their own who are going against what they believe all white people should think? That's why the majority of the people who were there were white supremacists organizations, groups, and people who want to remain in power and claim their superiority once again in America and make that legal. So you got to remember the law plays a major part. A lot of the things that took place historically to black people in this country, yes, they were atrocious. Yes, they were bad. Yes, they were all of the most terrible things you could think of, but they were legal. That's the part you got to be worried about. It was legal. They got away with it. And those things that weren't legal, the law did not apply to the powerful white men the same as it did to broke black folks. And we're going to get to that in a minute. The people are waking up, especially white folks. A lot of white people are waking up, y'all. And they have humanity. And guess what? They are the majority. This is why the minority has to continue to lie, cheat, and steal to try and remain in power. This is why the minority have not won the popular vote in a presidential election in America since 2004. There's a reason. Don't get it twisted, y'all. These hateful remainders are going to continue to cheat, steal, lie to get back in power. Autocracy. Look it up. It's coming if you're not careful. These conservatives are effectively using elections to dismantle democracy. They're going to use the election system. We've discussed it at length, how they gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1964. The purpose for gutting it is so that they could make changes to the laws where voting is concerned. Prior to that, they couldn't do it, and that happened under Obama. And they said that it was unconstitutional because the information that was used at the time to make it happen was no longer a thing because we didn't have those sorts of prejudicial behaviors anymore. And the minute they took it down, look what we're looking at right now. They're pulling it all over again. Jim Crow 2.0. And now what? We've lost because we wasn't paying attention. And we lost the Voting Rights Act of 1964, which kept the skirts on them people. Now all bets are off. They're doing whatever they want. And we're at their mercy. We got to get out there, y'all. We must. We all watching it happen right before our eyes. And if we're not careful, this experiment we call America with 3 Ks will be over very, very soon. Sooner than many of you think. In my lifetime, if we're not careful, this thing could end. Now, last part of this thing I'm going to do tonight. And before I get into it, let me say I appreciate my Oh So Smooth radio family. It's almost time for us to cut you all loose because we only got an hour with the Oh So Smooth family. We have a show that comes on right behind me in that regard. So I'm going to cut them loose and we're going to continue forward because we're getting ready to talk about the execution of the wrong man in Arkansas. Oh boy. Also, Smooth family, thank you for checking in, and you all have yourselves a wonderful evening. You are welcome to continue following on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, or, well, I would say Periscope, but that's no longer a thing. Y'all have yourselves a wonderful evening. All right, so, y'all, new data and these new DNA tests suggest, excuse me, suggest that they may have, in the state of Arkansas, executed the wrong man. Test results from a murder in Arkansas back in 1993 show that a man executed does not have a DNA match. Liddell Lee was his name. He was convicted of killing his white neighbor, Deborah Reese. Her name was Deborah Reese. Let me find a picture of Deborah Reese here. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Deborah Reese. Liddell Lee was convicted of killing Deborah Reese. He was one of 4 people executed in 2017. See, that happened in 2017 when he was when they decided to go ahead and take my man up out of here. He maintained his innocence to the very end. He literally said, I didn't do it, all the way to the end. Now, the thing about this case, like so many others, historically speaking, reminds me of any given movie that we've seen throughout our television watching, movie watching history where they execute the wrong man. As a matter of fact, it brings up the, I just watched this movie the other day, The Green Mile. And of course, they were executing a black man for the murder of a white woman, a white child, that he did not do. And how many times have we seen or heard this story? The ACLU and the Innocence Project have teamed up to test DNA evidence from the case, including the murder weapon and a bloody T-shirt found at the scene. They found DNA and fingerprints that don't belong to Lee. They have no matches to any of the DNA or the fingerprints. Prosecutors relied strictly on eyewitness testimony. All white eyewitness testimony, I might add. Obviously, all white racist testimony. Apparently, these were neighbors who claimed to have seen Lee walking around the neighborhood the morning of the murder. Walking while black. How many times have we seen this? How many times must we see this before justice is served? How many times have we seen these things, this execution, wrongful execution? How many times have we seen the fit the description? How many times have we seen the accusatory behaviors and finger points from those who don't know, just don't like the way you look? Why? Because your skin makes you a criminal. Because your skin makes you violent. Because your skin makes you a threat. Because your skin scares the police so terribly that they gotta kill you, even if you don't have the means by which to kill them. This is America. There were multiple attempts to get the DNA tests prior to execution, but all were denied. Now, if you're interested in justice, if you call yourself a member of the law enforcement community or a member of the prosecutorial or legal portion of our judicial system, would you not rather have justice than your power or your I'm right? I know I'm right. Beyond a reasonable doubt, I'm right. Because I got a bunch of people to lie for me, I'm right. Oh, does that not remind us of where we are right now in our political system? I'm right. Even if I'm wrong, I'm right. This is where we are. This is where we've always been. This is where we will continue to be. None of this is new. According to Arkansas attorney Leslie Rutledge, the courts consistently rejected frivolous claims. The claims were frivolous, according to her. Same kind of frivolous claims I guess George Floyd was making when he kept saying, I can't breathe on the ground. Because you do know, if you remember, if you watch the trial, let's not forget that according to the defense, George Floyd's claims of not being able to breathe were basically to be ignored because he said he couldn't breathe before they decided to throw him on the ground and place the knee on the neck and wait until the life left his body. Frivolous. Because the evidence, according to her, demonstrated. Did the evidence demonstrate, or did the liars who got on the stand demonstrate? The evidence demonstrated beyond any shadow of a doubt that he murdered Deborah Reese by beating her to death inside her home with a tire thumper. Beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, the minute the potential for DNA came up that might have shed a reasonable doubt on what happened, as a person with a conscience, a person with humanity, life in them, why would they not say, yeah, let's look at that? Let's see if this man really does deserve to die. If they were so confident that their case was what it was supposed to be, why would they stop it? After 20 years, she said, I'm prayerful that Deborah's family has had closure following this awful execution in 2017. Not one mention of DNA evidence in her statement. So she ignored that because, according to her, I guess, the DNA evidence is frivolous. It means nothing. Isn't that amazing? Is this her idea of justice? Did she have any interest in justice? I don't think so. More like power and control. That's what she had more interest in. More interest in being in power and in control and making sure that she was right. Even if she had to lie, even if she had to cheat, she had to be right and remain what? In power. But I'm going to say this. You don't have to worry because the organizations, the legal organizations that have taken this up, it's not going to go away that easy. And if she still has a career, it's going to probably be on the line behind this. So, like all the other individuals who have been wrong about people of color, she will have to, at some point, hopefully, pay for her mistake. Derek Chauvin. We had a videotaped execution of George Floyd that the whole world saw. But according to his lawyers, he was treated unfairly. He deserves a new trial. We all watched the tape. We all saw what happened from beginning to end. Yet, in the mind of his defense lawyer, he was treated unfairly. This is America. Now, according to Kamala Harris, James Clyburn, and Tim Scott, among others, America is not racist. See, they're going to make me lose a little bit of respect for them. No, they're going to make me lose a lot of respect for them. I don't know what they're trying to do. Remain in power. Sound familiar? Remain in control. Sound familiar? How can anybody that lives in this country, that knows anything about the history of this country or claims to, say that this country is not racist? How is it even possible to let that come out of your mouth? The very roots and foundation filled with the blood in the soil of black lives who have yet to be repaired. Every other person, group, people who have ever been wronged in this country have received some form, and outside this country have received some form of reparations for the transgressions against them by this country, including slave owners who got reparations for losing their slaves after the Civil War. They got paid. But the slaves themselves still, their ancestors still have not been repaired in this country. Our government just put through legislation that protects Asians and Pacific Islanders from hate crimes and violence. And we still, after 150 years, still cannot get a bill passed through our government against lynching. It's been on the table for decades. This is America. Not racist? Are you serious? The blood and the soil of black lives who have yet to be repaired. This country is racist to its core. The fruit that this country has borne is rooted in soil, fed by the blood of black people in America. Do not get that confused. This is why you have to be careful who teaches our youth, who teaches us about the truth, who gives us our history. That's why the black factor is here. Black media is a necessity because we have to understand the truth and we have to understand why we are where we are and not let them continue to whitewash and pretend that none of this happened. The new racism is telling you that racism don't exist. I heard somewhere that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was to make you believe that he didn't exist. Ooh, imagine that. When a person is prosecuted in this country, it's supposed to be beyond a reasonable doubt. But they want to pretend like there is no reasonable doubt, regardless of the DNA evidence, that this man still was the killer. And I guess they got to stick to that now because if it turns out that he wasn't, who's going to pay for that? How are they going to pay for that? Are they willing to give their careers up? No, that would be too much right. That would be too much integrity. They can't do that. So guess what? They double down on it. They double down on the murder of that black man. And I'm not talking about George Floyd. I'm talking about Liddell Lee. Because that's murder. If that man did not commit the crime that they accused him and claimed that he did and prosecuted him for and eventually executed him for, that's murder. And that's what white power and arrogance. And that's what we always see from racists. Because they don't care what they do to you. And even if they do wrong and make a mistake, you're not worthy of them admitting to having made a mistake. Oh, well, yeah, another one gone. I ain't worry about it. No big deal. It's just that's what it is. Zero humanity. And then the killing part is this. Let's say Liddell Lee didn't commit the murder. Guess what? There's a murderer still walking around out here that did commit the murder. But that's okay, though. Because guess what? He did it anyway. And they know he didn't do it. But guess what? There's still somebody walking around out here who did do it. And they okay with that. So now I have a question for y'all. And I want y'all to show me love. Hearts, if you think that we should do away with the death penalty in America. Thumbs up if you think that the death penalty is a necessity. Show me some love, y'all. Show me what you got. Because, you know, I used to be an advocate for the death penalty. I used to think that the death penalty was a necessity. I have gone against that idea in recent years because despite whatever religious ideas I may have or not have, despite whatever ideas I may have about humanity, there's a couple of reasons that I feel the way that I do now. The death penalty needs to be abolished. Number one, the system that we operate under in America is broken. It is severely fractured. It does not work. It has not worked because, first of all, it is not applied equally. It is not applied fairly, and it is not applied with the same. It's just not applied the same when it comes to black folks and white folks. We still see that every single day. We watch police overreach. We watch police brutality. We watch police attack people, murder people, unarmed people who don't even have the means by which to defend themselves. And that's another thing. For some reason, people think they're not supposed to be able to defend themselves against the police. That's the reason why they overwhelm people all the time. They run up in a gang like gang members. When one of them is not getting their way, the rest of the gang shows up and makes you comply. What happens when people stop because they've done nothing wrong, complying and start defending themselves? See, a lot of people forget that historically we had an organization called the Deacons for Defense. This was a group of men who were not going to allow law enforcement to just come into their community and do as they please. We had an organization called the Black Panther Party, who were not allowing the police to just show up and do as they please. The system is broken, and those who run the system refuse to fix it. So we're just supposed to be at their mercy. We're just supposed to comply just because what they say so, even when they're wrong. You have police officers walking around out here right now who don't know the law and have arrested, will arrest, will detain, will harass, will violate your constitutional rights right now. Some because they don't know any better, and others because they can, because they have a gang mentality. That's why they all back the blue. We're the blue. You might as well be the Crips or the Bloods. What's the difference? Because you're not serving or protecting or upholding the law when you're harassing people who've done nothing. Ask me how I know this. The system is broken. And no one in this country, no one on this earth has the moral authority to determine whether somebody else should die just because they committed a crime. It may be heinous, it may be foul, but we don't have that right. We didn't give life, and we don't have the right to take it away. This is where we are in America. As much as at one time I was for the death penalty, because I've matured and become older and I've been through a lot and I understand the system, I now know that this system is far too broken to judge anyone. If the system itself is not prepared to judge itself, it has no business judging anyone else. If the system itself cannot repair itself and those who want to repair it are not allowed to, this system has no place executing anyone. Times are changing. Science is changing. The world is changing. America is an experiment that has long passed its expiration date. The time is coming if we're not careful. Once again, I hope that I'm wrong. But we're headed down a rabbit hole, and we're just following, and nobody's paying attention. We're headed into a bad place, y'all. We got to get out of it. Something has to give. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your host, Brian Forbes. You have been a part of the Black Factor. And I just want to say thank you for hanging out with your boy and coming to kick it and listen to me rant. And hopefully I've planted a few seeds and given you some food for thought. I hope. I want to say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And I want you all to have yourselves a wonderful evening. Look for us again on next Wednesday, unless I get some sort of a bug up my butt between now and then, and I decide to jump back out there. You'll be the first to know. Everybody have yourselves a wonderful evening. Good night. Thank you. And love, peace, and chicken grease, y'all. We out.